Hello, my name is Guthrie, and today I'm going to walk you through the ethical formula, what it is, and how to use it. So I think ethics is really important. I think it's important for companies and organizations to talk about these issues, but often it can be hard because you don't really know where to start. It kind of turns, a lot of philosophical debates kind of turn into you say this and I say this, and that's interesting, and we agree to disagree and we walk away. And I really wanted to make something that helps ethics be applied, something that really helps move the conversation forward. And so what I did was I made this ethical formula. And the way it works is you pick a situation or product that you want to calculate if how relatively ethical or unethical it is to a particular target audience, and you do the steps, and at the end you get a score, okay? And it's on this nice little scale from 2, which is generally ethical, all the way to 10, which is generally unethical. So that's sort of what we're going to be covering today. A little bit about me quickly. I am a licensed attorney in the state of Illinois. I went to law school at the Loyola University School of Law here in Chicago, where I currently live. I also have an economics degree from the University of Wisconsin at Madison. So let's just talk big and broadly here about what we're going to be doing. I had already mentioned, we're going to put some inputs into this little program that I came up with, and we're going to then hit calculate, and we're going to get a score. The reason this is so useful is because you can use the score for all sorts of different things. And you can then debate not just this whether, hey, I think this is right and you think this is wrong, but I think this is right because of this. These are the assumptions I made. These are the scores that I gave. These are the values that I thought was important to our target audience. And so you can really then go from, well, I don't know how to talk about this topic, to talking about the details. And then you can run the formula multiple times. And hey, I think it's this and you think it's this. Let's meet in the middle, for example. So let's just walk through these steps. Step 1. This formula will give a score which indicates how ethical or unethical something is to a target audience. The formula relies on quality inputs to provide a quality output. So it's very true, garbage in, garbage out. So the first thing is you have to begin by choosing the ethical situation or product to calculate, and type the name in the first box right here, ethical situation or product to calculate. The example I wanted to give is I wanted to use the Ford Pinto case. So for those of you who may not be familiar with this, in the 70s, Ford made a car called the Ford Pinto, and it's a cute little car. The problem with the Ford Pinto is that in order to achieve its fun little shape, they had a new design, which was to put the gas tank right in the rear bumper, basically. And normally the car worked perfectly normal, but every so often when there was a rear end collision, the entire car would explode in a fiery ball of flame, probably killing and injuring those within. Not great. Not what you want. Now, later in court cases, it came to light. There was actually it's the rare legal case where they find the smoking gun, where actually the Ford execs actually knew about this issue and chose not to fix it because they were weighing the costs and benefits of people dying versus spending money to fix all the cars. Now, I'm not going to get into that portion. Let's just stick with the ethical situation. We'll just say selling Ford Pintos that sometimes explode. Okay, that is the ethical situation or product that we're going to be working on today. Selling Ford Pintos that sometimes explode, but usually not. And next we have to pick our target audience. That's step 2, okay? Choose the target audience. What may feel ethical or not to you is going to feel different to someone else. Attila the Hun will have different ethical values than Bernie Sanders. The end result, but once you do this, we have that internal feeling that I know that this is ethical, this is right, this is wrong. Well, you're only going to get, when you hit the end result, a outcome that feels right to you if you choose yourself as the target audience. It's one of the things that is a very common mistake when people do this is they choose, we'll just pick, Attila the Hun, right? And then they run it and they're like, this doesn't work, it doesn't make any sense, that's not ethical, how could you do that? It's like, well, it might be ethical to Attila the Hun, right? And if you ran it with your own personal values, then it's going to feel right to you. So you just remember that it is a garbage in, garbage out, or whatever. It's going to output whatever you input to it. And so it's important to pick what your target audience is. So again, it's the situation to a particular target audience. One of the fun advantages of this is that you can run this for different target audiences. So for example, let's say we have a certain app and we want to run it for American users versus Chinese users. Where, here in America, we have we think freedom of speech is really, really important, whereas in other countries, sort of social cohesion is more important. And so, you can even in our modern day, if we're not, necessarily going as far back as Attila the Hun, there's still going to be differences in between our target audiences. So you can use different target audiences to get different results and sort of see what works and what doesn't. Okay, so our target audience for our Ford Pinto case, we're gonna use sort of American society broadly, circa the late 1970s. And the thing you should, and that's when the Ford Pintos were happening. The thing you should remember is that the broader that you set your target audience, like American society, I mean that's very broad. The broader you set your target audience, the more general it's going to be, the more assumptions that you can sort of make, but the more variance within that target audience that there's going to be. So for example, some coal miner in West Virginia is going to have very different ethical values than someone in San Francisco who's like a millionaire, right? Like they're going to be different, and they're all lumped in together. So the broader you set your target audience, in some ways, the simpler it is, but there's going to be more variance within your population. The more narrow you set that target audience, the more accurate it might be for any individual person in there, but it's going to be a little more work to really kind of tease out what those what the values are that they really find important. Okay, so we now have our ethical situation and our target audience. Step 3. We're going to make a list of values that have worth or importance to our target audience, sort of, or society. Click here to go to the bottom of the page for some examples. Now, we're going to do this. We have some examples down here of values. One of the things I'd like to note is the difference between a value and a right. Sometimes I use them interchangeably. Values are something that's within me. Okay, that's what a value is. I value my privacy. Now, when a government takes the values of society and enshrines them into law, right? Like in the United States, we have the Constitution, where we have the right to freedom of religion. That's a right. That's also a value that has just been enshrined into law. I don't want to get into the government aspect or what one country has enshrined into law and another country hasn't. So I stick with values, but sometimes the phrase is right of freedom of expression. Sometimes I use those terms interchangeably, but that's the difference between a value and a right. We're focusing on values, which is that internal belief system. Okay, so some of these other values, we have privacy, like I said, freedom of religious choice, private property, health or safety, economic freedom. So we're not going to pick every single value of American society. I'm not sure exactly how. Freedom of religion is sort of ancillary when you're selling cars. I'm not exactly sure where that fits in. So we're going to stick with something a little simpler here. So what you do here is we have our list of values, okay? And we're gonna add our values in. So one of the things that I saw down here was health or safety. I think that is health or safety. I think that's an important value that American society had. We feel like it's a good thing. It's a value to be free from harm, to be safe, especially in a, I guess, dangerous situation like driving. And seeing as things explode in this situation, I think that's a good value to have. Okay, so if you're missing so if you need multiple values, you just click on the Add Value button right here, and it will add another room for another value. So the other thing that I'm going to put in, we have health or safety. I'm going to say property rights. Right? If we're selling cars, I think the right to have to have my own property, I think, is important. I can think of, are there any other values that I think are very important in this situation? Let's just leave it at 2, and we'll maybe move on from there. Obviously, I could add a lot more, but there's that balancing test of, well, I'd like to do it more accurately and I'd like to do it quicker. So that's sort of the balancing test you have to have. Obviously, if you had the complete list of your target audience, the persona with all of their values that's important, that's going to be more accurate, but sometimes you don't have time. Okay. I should just know, if you accidentally add too many values, you can always hit the remove value button to remove the latest value that you've had. I'll demonstrate that there, right? So it's like, I don't actually need that one, so we'll get rid of that. Now, the step 4 is you're going to give each value a weight, right? So here's the value name, and here's the weight, okay? Which signifies how important the value is relative to other values. If some values are more important, give them a heavier weight. Now, we have our property right value and our health and safety value. What's important to note is the values must add up to 1.00. That's the only thing that's important. I think health or safety is more important than a right to property in America, because we just think that we're going to put it at 0.6 there, and we'll give that one a 0.4 just because I think being safe is more important generally to most people than property rights, which are important, but maybe a little less so. Okay, so that's the weight. It just allows you to kind of play with things. So you can have a lot of values, but maybe that value in this case just isn't that important. Step 5. Now each value we're gonna rate 4 times on a 1 to 5 scale. All right. So here's our rating sliders. Okay, on a 1 to 5 scale. 1 means that the value has been defended, or the value has not been violated. Okay, so in health or safety, a 1 would mean, hey, there's no the value of being safe, of being healthy, it was successful or it wasn't violated. 5 means that the value has been devastatingly violated by whatever your ethical situation or product is. We'll say that generally I encourage people not to use 1s or 5s unless that's really truly the case. I would say dying in a giant fiery explosion actually might be a 5, because that's like one of the worst things that can happen. It's like families exploding in balls of flame. So in this case, a 5 may actually be required. Usually I encourage people, if you become slightly, if you look at your phone too much, that probably doesn't rise to the level of a 5, okay? So there are 4 ratings here, all right? 2 of them will involve the median outcome, the median person, median outcome, the average sort of in the middle outcome, and 2 will involve the outliers. So let's just take this case, and I'll walk you through how this works, okay? So we have selling Ford Pintos that sometimes explode. Let's start with the health or safety value. Now, we have a value that says we need to be healthy and we need to be safe. If I am in a car and it explodes in a fiery ball of flame, okay, that's our outlier approach, because for most people, they would not get in a rear-end accident, okay, and they would not explode when they got hit. So if we look at our average outcome for the median person, nothing really went wrong. They got in a car crash. I think they weren't the safest cars ever, but for most people, they got in a car crash. They were basically as safe or as unsafe as the average other car. So I'm going to say the average outcome is about 2.5. Like, they could have done a little bit better to make the car safe, but it's not particularly that bad for the average outcome of the average user of the Ford Pinto. Okay, let's look at our worst outcome for the median average person. Again, for most people, maybe you got in a really, really bad crash and it should have been safer. We'll say that like the worst case for the kind of average car crash was like a 3.5. It's a really bad crash, but again, it handled it about as well as any other car. So now let's take a look at our outliers. So our outliers are, if we look at our distribution, median is going to be right in the middle there, right? That's the average middle situation or person. The outliers are going to be at the extremes, right? So in the extreme case of the Ford Pinto, like when it was hit in just the right place, it would explode again in a fiery ball of flame. So the worst outcome for the outlier person is the worst, 5. Like really terrible, really, really, really bad outcome, okay? And the fact that it's really bad is important, all right? And then we have, okay, the average outcome outlier. Again, we'll say it explodes in a fiery ball of flame, but maybe the people in the crash are able to escape. Maybe it's not that bad, but it's still pretty bad. We'll give it a 4. Like this is not. It lights on fire, but hopefully after everyone has cleared to safety. But that's like still really bad. That's violating our health and safety rights if your car like lights on fire for reasons it should not. Okay, so that's bad. And now let's look at the property rights. Property rights are probably going to be about the same, right? So our worst outcome, if you violated my property rights, is when I think of a violation of property rights, I should have this property, but I don't because of the thing that happened. So we'll say, for the most part, not that big of a deal. I think I'll sort of mimic. Worst outcome, yeah, maybe the cars don't last as long as they should, and we'll just say, but for the most part they were fine. We'll give that again a 2.5. And then our worst outcome outlier, my car, I should have a car, but we'll just say it explodes in a ball of flame. So now I've completely lost my property. That feels taken. Maybe 5 is a little too harsh because it is just property, so we'll do like a 4.5. And for the most part, if it burns and my car's gone, that's probably pretty bad too. So yeah, we'll also do a 4.5. Okay. So I've kind of walked through what I think are the rights and the outcomes and the outliers. All right. And now the only thing that's left to do is hit the final score calculate button here, and we'll get our results. So we're going to do that, and we find that our final score result is 7.44, which, if you notice, is in the generally unethical range. And I have to say, that feels about right. People are it's unsafe, and people are needlessly getting injured. You should really not be selling cars that sometimes explode. And to the American society in that late 1970s, that's probably how they felt, which is why there's all sorts of laws and regulations, a lot of laws and regulations that came out of this case, especially because of the lying that happened later, which made it even more unethical because of the dishonesty. I could add that, but I don't think I have time to rerun it. So you can sort of see how you can sort of play for stuff, right? Like I could add, like, we have a value in society of like being honest, right? And the fact that they knew about the car and were lying about it, that's going to cause the score to go up. Okay, so you can sort of see how you start to play with this. One thing that I should note about this the magic sauce of the calculation that comes in is, I really wanted to balance. Like, it's not okay enough that most people were fine. Like imagine if all the cars exploded. That would be more unethical than if only 1 out of 1,000,000 cars exploded. So you should be able to get credit, I suppose, for it being 1 in 1,000,000 versus every car explodes. So what's important to what the average outcome is to people is important for sure. But then just because 1 in 1,000,000, 999,000 don't explode, the fact that the 1 is really, really bad, that people are getting injured, that's really bad. That counts too. So you can't just do a pure Bentham utilitarian ethical view of things and say, well, we've calculated it up, and yeah, it's really bad for some people, but it's just one person. Like, that counts too. So what the formula does is it takes a little bit of input from what's important for the average people, and then a little bit input from what happens to the outliers, and kind of combines that together. to get this scale. So I think it's a really, really good balancing act to find that sort of ethical framework. Now, is this perfect? No, but it's as good as I think anyone has done. So I'm pretty proud of it. I should also say that I coded the whole thing myself. That's also a point of pride for me. So that's a little bit more about the ethical formula. I have an entire course on much more about it and how to use it at courses.theteamleader.com, where I go into it in quite a bit more detail. But that's an overview, a nice little walkthrough about how to use it, how the sliders work, and you feel free to play away, right? So you can kind of change things, and depending on how you feel about things, the slider changes. So I encourage you to use this for all sorts of situations. It's really fun, and that's a little bit more of a walkthrough of how to use the ethical formula. I'm Guthrie. Thank you very much.